Can South Korea boost its economy by turning to gaming? That and more on Korea Technology Weekly. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. J.R. Riggin. In this episode, we'll be discussing South Korea's strategy to boost its economy by becoming a global gaming giant. Within the past several decades, competitive video games have surged in global popularity to become one of the world's fastest-growing new sports mediums. In 2020, esports is a billion-dollar industry with a massive following, and South Korea is at the center of it all. According to some estimates, Korea's gaming industry is worth more than $6.4 billion US. That's 8.8% of the country's 2018 total trade surplus, and as much as 67.2% of its cultural content industry in total. These numbers, as impressive as they are not entirely unique. After all, the United States and Chinese gaming markets are both bigger in raw dollar terms. What sets Korea apart is how deeply embedded competitive gaming has become in South Korean mass culture, making it an ideal breeding ground for a dynamic and highly lucrative pro-gaming scene. Many in the West typically see gaming as a solitary affair to be conducted from the comfort of your own home, but the streets of Seoul are littered with PC bangs. Think of them as internet cafes tailored to online gaming, where patrons pay per hour to play on gaming PCs. PC bangs emerged as a Korean cultural mainstay with the release of multiplayer strategy game StarCraft Brood War in 1999. It became part of Seoul teenagers' daily routine to meet up in PC bangs after school and play StarCraft for End, comparing themselves against their friends and training to climb the ladder of globally ranked players. The runaway popularity of StarCraft spawned the first wave of pro gamers like Im Yo-hwan, treated as a celebrity by the growing ranks of South Korean esports fans everywhere. South Korea's culture ministry sought to get ahead of the curve in 2000 with the creation of the Korea Esports Association, or KESPA, responsible for managing large esports events as the competitive scene branched out beyond StarCraft to titles like League of Legends and Dota 2. Events grew to encompass entire stadiums with tens of millions of viewers across the world and prize pools in the millions of dollars. To get a scale of how lucrative Korea's esports industry has become, consider that one of South Korea's most popular pro gamers, Faker Sang-hyuk, has a yearly salary of roughly $4.6 million US. The average NFL player makes $2.7 million. These hefty earnings are driven by advertising revenues, merchandising and ticket fees, and a steady stream of sponsorships from corporations looking to capitalize on gamers as a growing target demographic. Once seen as a juvenile delinquent activity by the more conservative segments of South Korean society, esports is now widely embraced as a source of national pride. Accredited esports academies operate across the country, and Culture Ministry expects over 100,000 new jobs to be added by the 2020s to support the booming South Korea esports infrastructure of producers, designers, engineers, promoters, organizers, and players. Korea has become the Hollywood of professional gaming, a densely packed, cost-efficient network of competitors, managers, sponsors, and gamers working in tandem to produce one of South Korea's most profitable and popular cultural exports. Pro gaming exists in its current form and size in large part thanks to the people that made it possible in South Korea. Other countries took years to catch up and are trying to mimic some of its successes. As the Culture Ministry prepares to relax older regulations to better support the competitive gaming industry into the coming years, the ongoing boom in digital content consumption and consistent growth of the global games market assures a bright future for South Korean esports. South Korea has laid out a new plan to nurture its gaming industry to boost the economy. Measures include easing regulations in the industry, increasing subsidies for startups, revamping the industry structure, and promoting both the industry and esports league. The country's decision comes amid the rapid growth of both the domestic and global gaming industry, boosted by the outbreak of COVID-19 across the world. In the first quarter of 2020, global mobile game sales rose 5% from the fourth quarter of 2019. The number of game app downloads stood at 13 billion, and consumer spending was $16.7 billion in the first 3 months of 2020. The number of game downloads in Google Play grew 25% year on year to about 10 billion. Apple's iOS also saw a 25% year on year increase in the number of game downloads, achieving 3 billion. In total, there were 13 billion downloads of game apps, accounting for 40% of the total 31 billion download of all apps. In particular, weekly mobile game downloads increased by 30% in March of 2020 compared to the fourth quarter of 2019. This indicates an upward trend, beginning with the coronavirus spreading around the world as people began to engage in social distancing. South Korea was among the top 3 countries that saw the largest growth in both the number of downloads and spending on mobile games. In particular, Lineage 2M, a mobile game developed by the South Korean firm NCSoft, saw dramatic growth. The game ranked 6th in the global mobile sales game rankings in the previous quarter, up 31 notches from 37th, and is currently the top seller of Google Play in South Korea. Considering such signs, it is understandable why the South Korean government is eager to nurture the gaming industry further and leverage it to boost the national economy. Enjoyed by 70.5% of the whole population, according to a 2020 game user market reported by KOCCA, Korea has a massive gaming infrastructure and high penetration. The gaming industry itself covers 13% of the entire national content industry and is reported to be worth over $7 billion. Korea's gaming market is leading the way globally as well. It ranks as the 4th largest market at 6.3% of the global game industry after the US, China, and Japan. In 2019, Korea showed the 5th greatest revenue of 15 trillion Korean won, which is about $1.2 billion. Game industry is a driving force of Korean exports as well. The industry generated content exports worth 6.9 billion, which is 10 times more than that of the music industry of 640 million. And in 2018, the game market accounted for 8.8% of Korea's total trade surplus. A wide variety of games are popular in Korea and includes mobile games, PC computer games, consoles, and arcades. The console market in Korea mainly consists of Nintendo Switch, Wii, PlayStation, and Nintendo DS. PC games have a high penetration in Korean society thanks to local PC bangs or computer rooms. The PC Bang offers not only the latest version of computers for a better gaming experience, but also allows people to get together to play games sitting side by side and offers a diverse choice of meals for a comfortable stay. However, the most frequently accessed and enjoyed type of game in Korea is mobile games, accounting for more than 90% of game access. South Korea's gaming companies originally grew with a focus for online games for PCs. South Korea was among the first to introduce nationwide broadband communication networks, enabling high-speed, large-capacity data transmission, resulting in numerous online games being released in the early 2000s. This is in stark contrast with Japan, where gaming companies have mainly developed on Nintendo and Sony consoles. Most South Korean PC games evolved uniquely as they can be played in large numbers and enable complex operations using keyboards. The so-called 3 Ns, Nexon, NCSoft, and Netmarble, have led the country's gaming industry and are now making their PC games available on various devices. South Korea's top 3 gaming companies are shifting focus now from online games for PCs to mobile games, as smartphones and consoles have become the new battlegrounds. The Korean Culture Ministry announced a 2020 plan to support the gaming industry with the aim of leading the future global market. During the last 10 years, the Korean game industry has been growing 9.8% on average annually. It has also become a high value-added industry, with export amount reaching $6.4 billion a year, which accounts for 8.8% of the country's trade surplus. The Culture Ministry expects that with its support, 102,000 new jobs will be created during the next 4 years. It added that the government will also support to grow the industry to reach 19.9 trillion Korean won in sales and 11.5 trillion Korean won in export amount by 2024. The Culture Ministry expects that the main growth engine to reach this goal will be small and medium-sized companies. The Korean government plans to expand the Global Game Hub Center, which currently supports game startups. The ministry also plans to provide consulting services and create a system for information about the foreign market to support small and medium-sized businesses who are willing to expand their presence overseas. The ministry also emphasizes plans to support the Korean esports industry by creating an ecosystem to stretch it out further. It will designate some local PC bangs or PC rooms as an esports facility and turn it into a center for holding diverse amateur game events and fostering amateur esports teams. To protect and support professional esports players, the ministry will also create and distribute a standard contract form. The government also plans to enforce an official player registration system this year. Also, to lead the world's esports market, the government in November will hold an esport competition event jointly with China and Japan. Is a new gaming giant on the horizon? South Korea is ready to dominate global esports. That's all for this week's show. Follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn at Idea Explorer or my website ideaexplorer.com. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions about the show and tune in next week for more news and trends about Korea technology.